On February 1st, the eve of Secretary of State Blinken's upcoming visit to China, a Chinese Communist Party or CCP spy balloon appeared in American airspace, derailing Blinken's trip to China. Is this incident a deliberate act of provocation against the US, or is it a mistake? Is it possible that it's an attempt by the hawkish PLA top brass to undermine Xi Jinping's attempts to de-escalate relations with the US as they seek to embarrass him as the top leader? As subsequent events unfold, we have noticed that this incident is inconsistent with Xi's agenda of trying to de-escalate international relations, particularly with the US. It should have revealed the internal strife within the CCP. The top brass of the PLA could have deliberately launched a balloon to sabotage Blinken's visit to China. This view is supported by a BBC report. It quoted Admiral Mike Mullen, the former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as saying on February 5th that the Chinese military might have launched the balloon intentionally to disrupt Mr. Blinken's trip to China. Admiral Mullen rejected China's suggestion it might have blown off course, saying it was maneuverable because it has propellers on it. The CCP has so far argued that the balloon is a weather observation machine with no military purpose, but on February 4th, the US showed evidence that the balloon was a sophisticated high-altitude spy craft. The balloon flew over several top-secret military bases as it traveled through the central US and then headed for the East Coast, where President Joe Biden ordered it shot down on February 4th. On February 6, National Security Council spokesman John Kirby told reporters that the US is recovering pieces of the communist balloon for analysis by intelligence experts and has no plans to return the wreckage to Beijing. One known detail, he said, is that the balloon was not only drifting but also had propellers and steering devices to provide some degree of control, even as it flew in high-altitude air currents. This balloon did have the ability to maneuver itself, to accelerate, decelerate, and steer. That is, it had a propeller, it had a rudder, and you can make it change direction if you want. Kirby said the propeller was located at the top of the balloon. He also said he would not discuss whether Chinese President Xi Jinping was aware of the balloon incident until the US recovers the balloon. No one wants to see a conflict here, he said. Secretary of State Blinken postponed a trip to China scheduled for February 5th after the revelation of the Communist Party spy balloon. Kirby said on February 6th that US officials would decide when Blinken should reschedule his trip. The Biden administration is currently facing a barrage of criticism, mainly from Republicans who have criticized Biden for failing to shoot down the balloon in a timely manner. President Joe Biden said on February 6 that relations between Washington and Beijing weren't weakened by the United States' downing of a suspected Chinese spy balloon.
No. We've made it clear to China what we're going to do. They understand our position. We're not going to back off. We did the right thing. And there's not a question of weakening or strengthening. It's just reality.
You've known about the balloon program for some time. Has it always been your view to shoot down a Chinese spy balloon, or was it only because it became public?
Oh, no, it was always my position. Once it came over into the United States from Canada, I told the Defense Department I wanted to shoot it down as soon as it was appropriate. They concluded we should not shoot it down over land. It was not a serious threat, and we should wait till it got across the water.
Does this change your speech tomorrow night, sir, and your foreign policy message?
On February 3rd, China's State Council announced the dismissal of the head of the China Meteorological Administration. The timing of the announcement of this official's dismissal is of interest. There is a public opinion that the dismissal of this National Meteorological Bureau chief is suspected to be a scapegoat for the spy balloon incident. At a regular press conference on February 6, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Mao Ning was asked if this official's dismissal was related to the balloon incident, and she replied, "I have no information on that." At a February 7th press conference, when asked whether China had asked the US to return the debris from the downed balloon, the spokeswoman didn't respond directly either.
What I can say is that this airship belongs to China and not the United States. This balloon is not American. The Chinese government will continue to defend its legitimate rights and interests.
Is it possible that CCP leader Xi Jinping was unaware of the spying balloon mission? Historically, there have been precedents. In January 2011, hours before former Chinese President Hu Jintao met with U.S. Defense Secretary Robert Gates, the CCP military tested a J-20 stealth fighter jet. The U.S. assessed that Hu was unaware of the Chinese military's testing of the stealth fighter at the time. Since the days of Hu Jintao, two major factions have existed in the top echelons of the Communist Party, with former party leader Jiang Zemin and his partner Zheng Qinghong making it almost impossible for the orders of his successor Hu Jintao to get out of his office during his time as the party leader. Xi Jinping spent a decade trying to purge Jiang's forces, but because he tried to conceal from the public the divisions within the CCP and the horrific crimes committed by Jiang, his purge has often been carried out in the name of anti-corruption and has never received any real support from the public, not to mention convincing the huge bureaucratic base of the CCP. Thus, during the Xi Jinping era, the propaganda machine constructed by the Jiang faction has unleashed unprecedented mockery of Xi, including terms such as Winnie the Pooh, elementary school student, and chief accelerator to mock Xi Jinping's incompetence. Over the past 3 years, the Communist Party's zero-COVID policy has spooked investors and dealt a heavy blow to the Chinese economy. At the same time, Chinese wolf warrior diplomacy has made Beijing enemies on all sides, raising tensions with the West. Given the many challenges at hand, Xi has recently sought to smooth international relations, particularly with the US. Under Xi's leadership, historic tensions between China and the US have spanned over a decade. In an effort to attract foreign investment, Chinese Vice Premier Liu He signaled in a high note at the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum in Switzerland last month that China has reopened and China is back. China's new foreign minister and former ambassador to the US, Qin Gang, emphasized building a stable US-China relationship. Although CCP leader Xi Jinping was re-elected for a third term in October 2022, he can hardly afford to let US-China relations deteriorate further. In the eyes of the CCP's powerful elite, managing these relations is one of Xi's main responsibilities. During his tenure, the US government has weakened major Chinese telecommunications companies such as Huawei, imposed a blanket export ban on key semiconductor technology, and strengthened military ties with various parts of Asia. Most recently, the US has expanded its access to the military bases in the Philippines. On February 3rd, a Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesman expressed regret that the balloon had mistakenly entered US airspace. Some experts believe the statement indicates that Xi was caught off guard by the incident. One view is that Xi is unlikely to have approved a mission like a spy balloon at this time. Xi undoubtedly wanted to use Blinken's visit to demonstrate progress in stabilizing US-China relations in the right direction. The CCP's move to fly a spy balloon into US airspace prior to Blinken's visit raises suspicions of serious internal strife. This balloon has in effect caused the cancellation of Blinken's visit to China. So by extension, is it possible that someone within the CCP doesn't want Blinken to visit China at this time? Judging from the regret expressed by the Chinese Foreign Ministry, it doesn't look like Xi authorized the launch of the balloon. The purpose of Blinken's visit was to discuss US-China relations, especially on the Taiwan issue, in the hope that the two sides would build a guardrail. So, is it possible that someone within the CCP, especially in the top echelons of the military, wants to use the Taiwan issue to make trouble in the future to embarrass Xi? It's still a strong possibility that can't be ruled out. In contrast to the relatively soft statements issued by the Chinese Foreign Ministry, the statement issued by the Chinese Defense Ministry on February 5th appeared more forceful. It says, "The US side used force to attack one of our unmanned civilian airships. It reserves the right to use necessary means to deal with similar situations." David Ignatius from the Washington Post reported that intelligence analysts were considering the possibility that the Chinese military or hardline figures in the leadership deliberately sabotaged Blinken's visit. Now, the balloon's disgraceful end, shattered by a missile from a US plane, the incident has rocked the political landscape of the volatile Chinese Communist Party. This presents a new embarrassment for Xi. His efforts to consolidate his third term in office have been overshadowed by a badly botched zero-COVID policy, unprecedented mass protests against epidemic control measures, and now a major crisis with the US. In any case, this surprise balloon is a disaster for the Communist Party. Beijing will be on the defensive in negotiations over Blinken's visit to China. And in Washington, there is near consensus that the relevant sanctions against the CCP will not be lifted and may even be beefed up. Beijing wants both to continue its engagement with the US and to appear strong in front of its domestic audience, as well as in saying that the balloon is civilian in nature. Being consistent with this narrative is a very difficult operation. Videos of the Chinese Communist balloon being shot down by the US military have been circulating online in China, fueling nationalist sentiment. Some little pinks claim that it was a civilian balloon and what the US did was excessive, as if shooting a mosquito with a cannon. Other little pinks countered by asking whether China should respond by shooting down all unauthorized US aircraft or vessels that enter China's airspace and territorial waters from now on. Reuters reported on February 6 that a review of dozens of Chinese documents revealed that the CCP military is increasingly interested in using high-altitude balloons to test enemy air defenses. A paper published in April 2022 by a researcher at a Communist Party military agency specializing in special flying machines said one of the military uses of such balloons is to test enemy air defense systems. The paper reads, "Balloons can induce and activate enemy air defense systems, providing the condition for conducting electronic reconnaissance and assessing the early warning detection and operational response capabilities of air defense systems." In addition, this paper and several others published in military-founded journals suggest that the Chinese Communist military establishment has a keen interest in studying how the US and other countries have used balloons in the military in the past, as well as their interest in closing the gap with foreign countries in this area. One of the articles reads, "To counter the growing threat from ground-based air defense systems to airstrike forces, it is necessary to use inexpensive balloons to create active and passive disruptions to effectively suppress enemy air defense warning systems and cover airstrike forces in their missions." A Reuters analysis of government tenders shows that Communist Party military units and state-owned research institutions have purchased high-altitude balloons and related technology over the past 2 years. These documents have now been significantly redacted by the authorities. These papers bring to mind a possible war in the Taiwan Strait. In the future, if the CCP invades Taiwan by force, Taiwan needs to be aware of the so-called civil-military integration. For example, the CCP's PLA may use balloons and fishing boats in large numbers, such as releasing thousands or even tens of thousands of balloons that are supposedly civilian. It would be tricky for Taiwan's defense, and it may take a relatively long decision time to respond to this kind of ambiguous provocation, thus losing the opportunity to act in a timely manner. From a military perspective, the good thing about the balloon incident is that the US military has made full use of this unexpected event to achieve the effect of a real-world combat exercise. On February 4th, a US F-22 Raptor fighter jet fired one AIM-9X Sidewinder short-range air-to-air missile, destroying the spy balloon. Some people feel that there was no need to waste a $400,000 missile. Instead, using machine guns would have been better to shoot it down. This should be deliberate on the part of the US military. Since the introduction of the F-22 fighter jet, there had been no record of actual combat. This operation is considered an experience of formal combat. Although it was only a balloon invading the US airspace, the US military followed the standard air defense protocol, dispatching the 5th-generation F-22 fighter jet with an early warning aircraft and a refueling aircraft collaborating. The F-22 finally made its first strike in a real-world environment. It can be described as a rare validation of its effectiveness. The F-22 is not only used for the defense of the US homeland, but is also constantly present in Europe, the Middle East, and the Western Pacific. It's the #1 weapon in the US military's fight for air control. As mentioned, the US recently expanded access to military bases in the Philippines. On February 1st, the US Secretary of Defense visited the Philippines, and the two sides finalized the continued use of 5 military bases by the US military, as well as the addition of 4 new bases. It is a move that complements the defense circle in the Taiwan Strait and gives the US military a key strategic pivot point in the Western Pacific to better respond to Chinese communist provocations.
We discussed concrete actions to address destabilizing activities in the waters surrounding the Philippines, including the West Philippine Sea. And we remain committed to strengthening our mutual capacities to resist armed attack. In terms of the EDCA locations, I just want to be clear that we're not seeking permanent basing in the Philippines. As you heard us say in our statements here, EDCA is a cooperative agreement that enables rotational activities. And so it's a key pillar of training and opportunities to strengthen our interoperability.
I would be stating the obvious to say that our longest partner and ally has been the United States. And as we traverse these rather troubled waters, geopolitical waters, economic waters that we are facing, I again put great importance on that partnership, specifically with the United States, but all partnerships and alliances that we are able to make with our friends around the world.
Once the CCP shows signs of starting a war in the Taiwan Strait, the U.S. military will likely quickly deploy its warplanes to the Philippines, echoing the Japanese base in Okinawa, one to the south and one to the north. The U.S. military has achieved to the greatest extent possible a decentralized deployment. If the CCP's missile attack wanted to simultaneously target Taiwan, Okinawa, the Philippines, Guam, U.S. aircraft carriers, and amphibious assault ships to destroy U.S. airplanes, it would be impossible for the CCP to achieve the attack effect by scattering its force, and it would be even more difficult to launch the attack simultaneously. In other words, the U.S. military has secured the maximum number of separate bases in the Western Pacific, and the possibility of warplanes being destroyed in large numbers by the CCP missiles at airports is significantly reduced. At the same time, the U.S. military can launch a swift counterattack at the first opportunity. As in the Asia-Pacific War of World War II, air dominance will still determine the winner of the war. In a possible war in the Taiwan Strait, if the U.S. military decides to engage in the war, Chinese Communist warplanes may be shot down like balloons before they even detect U.S. forces.